I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam doors. I just started making phone calls. The first one was to my lawyer. The second was to my financial advisor. The third was to a real estate agent I'd known for 2 decades. By the time the sun set that evening, I had set something in motion that nobody in my family saw coming. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Michael Torres. I'm 63 years old. And for the past 14 years, I've been a stepfather to a woman named Sarah. When I married her mother, Linda, Sarah was 18, fresh out of high school, full of plans and dreams that seemed to shift with the wind. Before I continue, please like this video and listen to my story till the end. Let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. It would mean the world to me. Linda and I met at a charity gala in Seattle. She was a widow, graceful and warm, or so I believed at the time. Sarah had lost her biological father when she was 12. I wasn't trying to replace him. I never claimed to be her dad. I was just trying to be present. And I was present for 14 years. I paid for her college tuition when she decided to study marketing at the University of Washington. I paid for her apartment when she said the residence halls were too loud. I paid for her car when she said she needed dependable transportation. I paid for her trip to Paris when she said it was for cultural enrichment. I paid for her first startup when she said she wanted to be an entrepreneur. That business collapsed within 6 months. I didn't say a word. I just covered the debts and helped her shut it down properly. I helped her relocate 4 times. I fixed her car 3 times when she couldn't afford the repairs. I was there at 2 in the morning when she called, sobbing about a breakup. I was there when she got severe food poisoning and needed someone to rush her to the emergency room. I was there when she fought with her mother and needed someone to mediate between them. Linda always told me I spoiled her. Maybe I did, but Sarah was the closest thing I'd ever have to a daughter. My first marriage ended before we had children. This was my second chance at family, and I wanted to get it right. 2 months ago, Sarah got engaged to a man named David. Decent enough guy. Worked in software development. Seemed to make her happy. I was genuinely happy for her. They set a date for September. Planned a lavish wedding at a winery in Napa Valley. 200 guests, live orchestra, exotic flowers, the whole 9 yards. Linda asked me one evening how much we should contribute. I told her not to worry about it. I'd cover the wedding expenses, all of them. It's what fathers do, I said. Even stepfathers. Sarah hugged me when I told her. She actually cried a little. She said I was the best. That David's family could never afford something like this. That it meant everything to her. Linda squeezed my hand across the dinner table and smiled at me in that way she used to back when things were still good between us. I should have known better. 3 weeks ago, Sarah came over to the house with David. They wanted to review some wedding logistics, seating arrangements, mostly who sits where, who gets seated next to whom, all the delicate politics of a big wedding. We were in the living room, spreadsheets laid out on the coffee table, when Sarah's phone rang. It was her biological father's brother, her Uncle Thomas. He lived in Boston. They'd always been close. She put him on speaker. They discussed the wedding. He said he was flying out for it. Wouldn't miss it for anything. Then he asked if her dad would have been proud. Sarah's eyes welled up. She said, "Yes, absolutely." They talked about memories, about how her father used to dance with her in the kitchen when she was little. I didn't mind this. I never minded when she talked about her biological father. He was part of her history. I respected that. Then Uncle Thomas said something that froze my blood. He said, "And I'm so relieved you're keeping it just family, Sarah. Your dad would have wanted that. No outsiders, just the people who truly matter." Sarah laughed. She actually laughed. She said, "I know, right? That's exactly what I wanted. Just real family." I looked at Linda. She was staring at the spreadsheet. She didn't look up. David shifted uncomfortably on the couch. I asked Sarah what her uncle meant by that. She looked at me like I'd interrupted something sacred. She took the phone off speaker and walked into the kitchen. I could hear her voice muffled, saying something about calling him back later. When she came back, I asked again. She sighed. She said it wasn't a big deal. She said Uncle Thomas was just excited about the wedding. I said, Sarah, what did he mean by no outsiders? She looked at David. David looked at his hands. Then she said it. She said, Michael, you've been wonderful. You really have. But this is my wedding day. It's about me and David, and it's about honoring my real dad's memory. I think it would be better if you didn't attend. I didn't understand at first. I thought I'd misheard her. I said, What? She said, I don't want you at the wedding. Linda finally looked up. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but nothing came out. I said, Sarah, I'm paying for the wedding. She said, I know, and I'm grateful. I really am. But this isn't about money. This is about what feels right to me. And having you there, sitting in the front row like you're my dad, it just feels wrong. My dad died. You're not him. You're Michael. You've been kind to me, but let's be honest about what this is. The room went silent. David said very quietly, Sarah, maybe we should discuss this later. She ignored him. She was looking at me now, and her expression wasn't angry. It was almost pitying. She said, I've been thinking about this a lot. The more I plan this wedding, the more I realize I want it to be authentic. I want to honor my father. I want his memory there. And I can't do that if you're sitting there pretending to be him. What happens next will shock you. Stay with me. I said, I never pretended to be your father. She said, You kind of did, though. You always acted like you had some right to be involved in my life. You always acted like I owed you something. Linda said very softly, Sarah, that's not fair. Sarah turned on her mother. She said, Mom, you know it's true. Michael's always been hovering, always asking questions, always trying to be part of everything. I'm 28 years old. I don't need a dad anymore. I especially don't need a fake one. I stood up. I needed to move. Needed to do something other than sit there listening to this. I said, So you want me to pay for your wedding but not attend it? She said, I mean, if you want to put it that way, yes. I'm not saying you have to pay for it, but you offered. If you don't want any more, that's fine. David and I will figure something out. I looked at Linda again. She was crying now, silently, tears just streaming down her face, but she didn't say anything. She didn't tell Sarah to stop. She didn't defend me. That's when I knew this wasn't just Sarah. Linda agreed with her. Maybe not out loud, but in the way she stayed silent, in the way she wouldn't look at me, I could see it. She'd been thinking the same thing. I was the outsider. I'd always been the outsider. I said very calmly, All right. Sarah blinked. She said, All right, what? I said, All right, I won't attend the wedding. Is there anything else you need to tell me? She looked relieved. She actually smiled a little. She said, No, that's it. I'm glad you understand, Michael. I really am. This doesn't change anything between us. I still care about you, but this day is special, and I need it to be right. David stood up. He said they should probably leave. Sarah agreed. They gathered their papers and headed for the door. Before she left, Sarah turned and said, Thanks for being cool about this, Michael. You're a good guy. Then they were gone. Linda and I sat in the living room for a long time without speaking. Finally, she said Sarah didn't mean it the way it sounded. I said, Yes, she did. She said, She's just emotional about the wedding. She misses her father. You can't take it personally. I said, Linda, your daughter just told me I'm not family, that I'm an outsider, that I've been pretending for 14 years. How exactly am I supposed to take that? She didn't answer. I said, And you didn't say anything. You sat there and let her say all of that. And you didn't say one word in my defense. She said, What did you want me to say? She's my daughter, Michael. I can't control how she feels. I said. You could have told her she was wrong. You could have told her I've been there for her since she was 18 years old. You could have told her that family isn't just blood. Linda wiped her eyes. She said, Maybe she's right though. Maybe we've all been pretending. That was the moment I knew my marriage was over. I didn't argue with her. I didn't try to change her mind. I just stood up, walked upstairs to my office, and closed the door. Then I started making those phone calls. The next morning, I told Linda I needed to handle some business. I'd be out most of the day. She barely looked up from her coffee. I met with my lawyer first. Her name is Margaret, and we've known each other for 30 years. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then pulled out a notepad and started writing. She said, Are you certain about this, Michael? I said, Completely. She said, This is going to hurt a lot of people. I said, They hurt me first. She nodded. She said, All right then. Let's discuss the house. The house Linda and I lived in was in my name only. I'd owned it for 5 years before we got married, and we never changed the title. It was a beautiful house in the suburbs. 4 bedrooms, mountain view, worth about $2 million. Linda had moved in when we got married. Her name wasn't on anything. Margaret said I had every legal right to sell it. Linda would have no claim unless she could prove she'd contributed significantly to the mortgage or renovations. She hadn't. I'd paid for everything. I asked Margaret how long it would take to sell a house like this if I wanted to move quickly. She said, In this market, you could have it sold in 2 weeks if you price it competitively. I said, Do it. Next, I met with my financial advisor, Richard. I told him I needed to liquidate some investments and reorganize my finances. I wanted everything separated, everything clean, no joint accounts, no shared assets. I wanted to know exactly what was mine and what needed to be protected. Richard asked the same question Margaret had. Was I certain? I was certain. He said it would take a few days to sort everything out, but it could be done. Then I met with a real estate agent named Paul. He'd sold me the house originally. I told him I wanted to list it immediately. I wanted it sold before the end of the month. He whistled. He said, That's fast, Michael. What's happening? I said, I'm making a change. He said he could do it. He'd have photographers out that week. We'd list it high, see what happened. I thanked him and went home. Linda was in the kitchen when I returned. She asked where I'd been. I said, Taking care of things. She said Sarah had called, wanted to know if we could all have dinner next week to finalize some wedding details. I said, You can have dinner with her. I'm not going. Linda frowned. She said, Michael, don't be like this. She apologized. I said, No, she didn't. Linda said, Well, she feels bad. That's basically the same thing. I said, It's not. I went upstairs. I had work to do. You won't believe what I did next. Keep listening. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved through the house like a ghost. Linda asked me several times what was wrong. I told her nothing. I was just busy. She seemed to accept that. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday. Linda saw it when she came home from her book club. She came into my office holding her car keys, face pale. She said, Why is there a for sale sign on our lawn? I said, Because I'm selling the house. She said, You're what? I said, I'm selling the house. It's mine. I'm selling it. She said, You can't do that. I live here. I said, Not for much longer. She stared at me. She said, Michael, what is going on? I said, I'm disappearing, Linda. That's what Sarah wanted, isn't it? For me to not be there. Well, I'm taking her advice. I'm removing myself from this family. She said, This is insane. You're being ridiculous. I said, No, I'm being clear. Your daughter made it very clear that I'm not family. You made it very clear by staying silent, so I'm acting accordingly. Linda started crying. She said this wasn't fair, that I was overreacting, that Sarah didn't mean it. I said, "She meant it. And so did you." She begged me to reconsider. She said we could talk about this, go to counseling, work things out. I said counseling wouldn't change the fact that after 14 years, I was still just the outsider who paid for things. The house sold in 9 days. A young couple from California. Cash offer, $2.3 million. Paul called me personally to say it was the fastest sale he'd seen in years. I accepted immediately. Closing was set for 3 weeks later. Linda moved into a hotel. She called me every day, sometimes twice a day, begging me to stop this. I didn't answer most of the calls. When I did, I kept it brief. The decision was made. Sarah called me too. She was furious. She said I was being cruel to her mother. She said I was punishing them both for one mistake. She said she'd already apologized. What more did I want? I said, "You didn't apologize, Sarah. You said you felt bad? That's not the same thing." She said, "Fine, I'm sorry." "Okay? I'm sorry. Is that what you want to hear?" I said, "It's 14 years too late." She said, "What does that even mean?" I said, "It means I spent 14 years being there for you. And the moment it mattered, you told me I was nobody. So now I'm acting like nobody. I'm disappearing just like you wanted." She started crying. She said I was ruining her wedding, ruining her life, ruining everything. I said, "Sarah, I'm not coming to your wedding. I'm not paying for your wedding. I'm not paying for anything anymore. You're 28 years old. You'll figure it out." She said, "You already promised to pay." I said, "And you promised I was part of the family." We both said things that turned out not to be true. Then I hung up. David called me the next day. He was polite, careful. He said he understood I was upset, but could we please talk this through like adults? I said, "David, this doesn't involve you." He said, "It kind of does. You're pulling funding for our wedding." I said, "I'm pulling funding for a wedding I'm not invited to. That seems reasonable to me." He said Sarah was willing to invite me now if that's what it took. I said, "I don't want a pity invitation, David. I want to be respected. Since that's apparently not possible, I'm removing myself from the situation." He tried to argue. I wished him well and ended the call. The closing date arrived. I'd already moved most of my personal belongings into a storage unit. I'd rented a small condo downtown, something temporary, while I figured out my next move. The night before the new owners took possession, I went back to the house one last time. It was empty. All the furniture was gone, sold or donated. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors. I walked through each room slowly. The living room where Sarah had told me I wasn't family. The kitchen where Linda and I used to have coffee every morning. The bedroom where we'd slept for 14 years. In the kitchen, I left something on the counter. A black binder. Inside that binder was a record of every single expense I'd incurred for Sarah over the past 14 years. Tuition receipts, rent payments, car payments, business loan payoffs, groceries, utilities, medical bills, travel expenses, everything. I'd spent months compiling it, going through old bank statements, credit card bills, receipts I'd kept in file boxes. Margaret had helped me organize it all chronologically. The total came to $473,000. Each page was labeled with the date, the amount, and what it was for. At the end of the binder, I'd included a letter. This letter changed everything. "Don't stop now." The letter said, "Sarah, you told me I was not your father. You told me I was an outsider. You told me I had been pretending for 14 years. You were wrong about the pretending. I never pretended. I was genuine in everything I did for you. But you were right that I'm not your father. Your father passed away when you were 12. I'm just the man who took care of you after that. This binder represents what that care looked like in financial terms. I'm not asking you to pay me back. Money was never the point, but I wanted you to see it. I wanted you to understand what it means when someone chooses to be there for you. Your real father would have done the same things I did, probably more. He would have loved you unconditionally. He would have supported your dreams, even the ones that failed. He would have been there at 2 in the morning when you needed him. I tried to do that too. I tried to be someone you could count on. You've made it clear that wasn't enough. Or perhaps that it was too much. Or perhaps that it simply didn't matter because I wasn't the right person. That's your choice to make. But it's also my choice to accept it and move forward. I'm not coming to your wedding. I'm not paying for your wedding. I'm not paying for anything else in your life. Not because I'm angry, though I am. Not because I want revenge, though part of me does. But because you asked me to disappear, and I'm respecting that request. I hope your wedding is everything you want it to be. I hope David makes you happy. I hope your life is full of people who meet your standards for what real family means. I won't be one of those people. Take care of yourself, Sarah. Michael. I left the binder on the counter, locked the door behind me, and drove to my new condo. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7:30. It was Linda. She was screaming. I'd never heard her scream like that before. She'd gone to the house to collect some items she'd left behind. The new owners had given her permission to stop by before they moved in. That's when she found the binder. She'd read the whole thing, then she'd called Sarah. Sarah had driven over. They'd both read it again, sitting on the floor of the empty kitchen. Linda kept screaming into the phone. She said I was cruel. She said I was petty. She said I'd turned a family disagreement into a war. I said, Linda, Sarah told me to disappear. I disappeared. I don't understand why you're surprised. She said, you've destroyed everything. The wedding is in 6 weeks. How is she supposed to pay for it? I said, that's not my problem anymore. She said, $473,000, Michael. You kept track of every penny. What kind of person does that? I said, the kind of person who wanted to remember that he mattered, since apparently nobody else was going to remember it for me. Sarah got on the phone. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't mean it. She said she'd been stupid and selfish, and she understood now what I'd done for her. I said, Sarah, you meant it. You meant every word. The only thing you're sorry about is that there are consequences. She said, please, Michael, please don't do this. I'll invite you to the wedding. You can sit in the front row. You can walk me down the aisle. Whatever you want. I said, I don't want a pity invitation. I wanted respect. I wanted to be treated like I mattered. You made it clear that I don't. So now I'm living accordingly. She begged. She said she'd pay me back every penny, even though she had no idea how. I said, keep your money. Spend it on therapy instead. Maybe figure out why you think people are disposable. Then I hung up. Over the next few days I received calls from Uncle Thomas in Boston, from David, from 2 of Linda's sisters, from Sarah's best friend. Everyone wanted to tell me I was being unreasonable. Everyone wanted to tell me I was hurting people over nothing. I stopped answering my phone. David eventually sent me an email. He said they'd had to downsize the wedding significantly. They were moving it from the Napa Valley Winery to a small restaurant in Seattle. The guest list had been cut from 200 to 50. No live orchestra, no exotic flowers, just a simple ceremony and dinner. He said Sarah was devastated. He said Linda wasn't speaking to Sarah, blamed her for destroying the family. He said this whole thing was tearing everyone apart. He asked one more time if I'd reconsider. I didn't reply. The wedding happened on schedule. I know because Linda's sister posted photos on social media. It looked nice. Small, but nice. Sarah wore a simple dress. David wore a suit. They smiled for the camera. I felt nothing looking at those photos. Not satisfaction, not anger, not sadness. Just nothing. 3 months after the wedding, Linda filed for divorce. I didn't contest it. Margaret handled everything. The divorce was finalized in 6 months. Linda sent me one letter during that time. She said she hoped I was happy now that I'd destroyed our family. She said she'd wasted 14 years on me. She said I was a bitter, small man who couldn't handle his ego being bruised. I didn't respond to that either. Sarah sent me a letter too. It was long, rambling, full of apologies and explanations. She said she'd been stressed about the wedding. She said she hadn't thought about what she was saying. She said she understood now how much I'd done for her, and she'd spend the rest of her life being grateful. I didn't believe her, but I appreciated the effort. I didn't respond to that either. The ending will leave you speechless. Stay with me. 6 months after the divorce, I moved to a coastal town in Oregon. I'd always loved the ocean. It was quieter there, peaceful. I bought a small house overlooking the water, something I could afford easily with the money from selling the Seattle house and splitting assets with Linda. I started volunteering at a community center, teaching financial literacy to young adults. I joined a hiking group. I took up painting, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. People ask me sometimes if I have family. I say I used to, but not anymore. They usually don't ask follow-up questions. I'm 63 years old now. I've got enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I've got hobbies I enjoy, friends I see regularly, a routine that makes me happy. I don't think about Sarah much anymore. When I do, I don't feel angry. I just feel distant, like she's someone I used to know a long time ago. I don't think about Linda either. I think about myself, and the choices I made and whether I'd do anything differently. I wouldn't. People think revenge is about hurting the person who hurt you. It's not. Revenge is about taking back your dignity. It's about refusing to let someone treat you like you don't matter and then continue benefiting from your presence. I didn't destroy my family. They did that when they decided I was disposable. I just accepted their decision and acted accordingly. Sarah wanted me to disappear. So I did. Not in the way she meant, where I'd quietly absent myself from the wedding but still be there to pay for everything. Still be there to call when she needed something. Still be there to play the role of the grateful stepfather who knew his place. I disappeared completely. I took my money, my time, my energy, and I redirected it toward people who actually valued it. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect. Last month, I got a message through social media from David. He said Sarah had given birth to their first child, a daughter. He said they'd named her Linda after her grandmother. He said Sarah had been talking a lot about family lately, about how she wanted to do better with her daughter than she'd done with the people who'd cared for her. He said she'd like to talk to me sometime if I was open to it. I read the message twice, then deleted it. I'm 63 years old. I don't have time to teach grown adults how to treat people with respect. That's something they should have learned a long time ago. I've got a painting class this afternoon. Tomorrow, I'm hiking up the coastal trail with my group. Next week, I'm starting a workshop on retirement planning at the community center. My life is full. It's quiet, but it's full, and it's mine. Sarah got what she asked for. I disappeared. And in doing so, I found something I didn't even know I'd lost. My peace. My dignity. Myself. So tell me, was I wrong? Did I take it too far? Or did I do exactly what needed to be done? Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because at the end of the day, respect isn't negotiable. And family, real family, doesn't make you feel like you're disposable. They make you feel like you belong. And if they can't do that, then maybe it's time to find people who will. I found my people. I found my place. And I've never looked back. This is my story. And I'm finally at peace with it.